Summer 1944. In the bunkers of Normandy, German signals intelligence officers listen intently. They are the elite, trained to decipher an enemy's most guarded secrets. But what they hear on the American frequencies is not the structured, coded traffic of a professional army. It is chaos. A flood of overlapping, informal chatter. Men calling out targets, asking for support, coordinating movements, all in the clear, in the middle of a firefight. To the German specialists, this is a sign of total indiscipline, a fatal amateur mistake. They could not have been more wrong. This indiscipline was, in fact, a revolution, broadcast from a 5-pound box of circuits and wires. The SCR-536 Handie-Talkie. It was no superweapon. Its signal was weak, its range often less than a mile, and it consumed batteries relentlessly. But the American decision to mass-produce it put unprecedented power into the hands of junior leaders. So how did this simple, flawed radio become a key to survival and victory on the battlefields of Europe? By 1942, the high commands in both Berlin and Washington, D.C. faced the same lethal paradox. Modern warfare, with its speed and firepower, had broken the very thing it relied on: communication. Once a firefight erupted, the battle plan dissolved. Platoons and companies went dark, isolated in a storm of steel. A company commander, just a few hundred yards away, was effectively blind. His orders, sent by runner, were a death sentence for the messenger, and would arrive too late to matter. The battlefield was a collection of deaf, disconnected islands of violence. The German response was not technological, but philosophical. It was baked into their doctrine of Auftragstaktik, mission-type tactics. The solution was the man, not the machine. They would invest years in creating a corps of highly trained, professional, non-commissioned officers. These NCOs were empowered to act independently, to take initiative, to achieve the commander's intent, even if they were cut off from orders. German radios were powerful and effective, but they were typically reserved for company headquarters and above. The system was built on trust in human judgment under fire. The American solution was born from a different reality. The US Army was expanding at a staggering rate, and it could not instantly forge the deep NCO culture that defined the Wehrmacht. So it placed a different bet on industry. The question wasn't how to train the perfect soldier, but whether they could build a machine, a radio, so simple, so cheap, and so small that it could be given to nearly every frontline leader. It was a wager that technology could compensate for inexperience, giving lieutenants and sergeants a voice in the chaos. This fundamental difference in philosophy, trusting the man versus betting on the machine, was about to move from the training ground to the ultimate test. And its first arena would be the unforgiving mountains and valleys of the Mediterranean. July 1943, the hills of Sicily. Here, in the unforgiving terrain where squads disappeared from view and battle plans fell apart, the American bet on technology paid its first dividend. Imagine a platoon leader, his men pinned by the relentless fire of a German MG-42 nest. The old way meant sending a runner on a near-suicidal mission. The new way was revolutionary. He raised his 5-pound SCR-536 Handie-Talkie. His call for help went directly to his company commander, carrying the backpack-sized SCR-300. The request for fire support was not answered in 30 minutes or an hour. It was answered in less than 5, as the company's own 60mm mortars rained down on the German position. The machine had worked. But the hills of Sicily were a dress rehearsal. The true test would come a year later, in a landscape that seemed designed to break armies, the hedgerows of Normandy. June 1944. This was not open country. It was the bocage, a suffocating maze of small fields walled in by ancient earthen banks, 3 to 4 feet high and tangled with impenetrable roots and thorns. A platoon could be 50 yards away from its neighbouring unit and be completely invisible, completely isolated. Visual command was impossible. Runners were a fantasy. Here, in this green labyrinth, the SCR-536 became the nervous system of the American infantry. Platoon leaders, crawling in ditches, could orchestrate a ballet of fire and movement. First squad, put fire on that stone house, second floor window. Third squad, on my mark, move up the left hedgerow. This was not a general's grand strategy. This was micro-command, a squad leader talking to another squad leader, turning a company from a collection of isolated fire teams into a single, coordinated predator. From their bunkers, German signals intelligence officers of the 7th Army listened and were baffled.
Their own doctrine demanded rigid radio discipline, formal call signs, precise procedures, encrypted messages. What they heard on the American frequencies was the opposite, a cacophony of overlapping voices using first names, speaking in plain conversational English. An early intelligence report from Normandy described the American radio traffic as undisciplined, chattering, and highly insecure. The German specialists interpreted this chaos as a sign of poorly trained signalmen. They were missing the crucial detail. These weren't signalmen. They were riflemen, sergeants, and lieutenants, talking directly in the heat of combat. The misunderstanding was rooted in two profoundly different approaches to technology. The American SCR-536 Handie-Talkie-a weighed just 5 pounds. It was simple, with fixed channels selected by plugging in a crystal and operated with a single push-to-talk button. Its range was barely a mile on a good day. It was designed to be disposable, ubiquitous, and used by everyone. The German equivalent for a man-portable radio was a masterpiece of engineering, like the Tornisterfunkgerät D2. It was powerful, with excellent range and variable frequencies, but it weighed over 40 pounds, required a dedicated, highly trained operator, and was an asset assigned to the battalion or regiment, not the platoon. A German platoon leader was often just as brave and well-trained as his American counterpart. But when the shooting started, he was electronically alone. His only link to support was a man running with a message. By late July 1944, the tone of the German intelligence reports began to change. The initial contempt turned to alarm. Analysts started connecting the chatter to battlefield outcomes. An intelligence summary noted with concern the astonishingly rapid reaction time of American artillery and mortars. They realized the informal talk wasn't just noise. It was a real-time targeting network. A voice saying, "Mortars, drop 50, there's a machine gun in that corner thicket," was not indiscipline. It was a death sentence, delivered in seconds. The unmilitary noise was now correctly identified as a lethal threat they could not match. This ad hoc network reached its full potential when it bridged the gap between different branches of the army. An infantry sergeant, crouching in a water-filled ditch, could use his SCR-536 to tell his platoon leader about a target. That platoon leader, carrying the more powerful backpack SCR-300, could then relay the message directly to the company commander, and that commander might be standing on the turret of a Sherman tank, pointing. Tell the tank there's a PaK-40 anti-tank gun hidden in the tree line 200 yards to his right. Information that once took an hour to travel, if it travelled at all, now flowed from the eyes of the infantryman to the main gun of a tank in under 2 minutes. The Americans hadn't just given their soldiers a radio. They had created a decentralized, combined arms nervous system that could think and react faster than its enemy. But this powerful new weapon was sustained by a fragile, invisible lifeline, and that lifeline was about to be stretched to its breaking point. But this powerful new weapon had a hidden, voracious appetite. The SCR-536 was notoriously inefficient, running on 2 specialized batteries, including the BA-38 dry cell. In heavy combat, a fresh battery might last only a few hours. A Signal Corps report from Europe would describe the consumption as staggering. This created a colossal logistical burden, pushing millions of these small, disposable batteries to the frontline foxhole. A platoon that outran its supply of BA-38s was instantly rendered deaf and mute. Its greatest tactical advantage was lost not to an enemy bullet, but to a simple, dead battery. As the autumn of 1944 turned to winter, this fragile dependency was about to be tested in the most brutal way imaginable. December 1944. The Ardennes forest. The German offensive shatters the American front, and the network faces its do-or-die moment.
The brutal cold is not just another hardship, it is a direct assault on the technology itself, draining precious battery life at a catastrophic rate. In the encircled town of Bastogne, the 101st Airborne is cut off. Here, the German strategy of creating chaos meets a system designed to thrive in it. A company commander, his SCR-300, the only link to his scattered platoons, becomes a human command node. The Handie-Talkie crackles. "Panzer moving up the Noville Road," another voice. "Probing attack on the east flank." He uses this real-time flood of information to shift his meagre reserves and directs the last few mortar rounds. The very indiscipline the Germans had once dismissed is now the only thing holding the line. And so we come back to the German signals officers, listening in their Normandy bunkers. The chaos they heard was real. By their standards, it was a total failure of radio discipline. But they had fundamentally misread its purpose. The US Army had made a conscious choice to trade the Wehrmacht's procedural perfection for speed and resilience. It put the power of instant communication not in the hands of the specialist, but in the hands of the sergeant in the foxhole. It wasn't about a superior machine. It was a revolutionary philosophy of command, broadcast live from the front line. The Wehrmacht had perfected radio technology to allow generals to command from the rear. The Americans gave that same power to the soldiers fighting on the front line.